to transform food systems. This is a game.
Good morning, Madam Minister.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. And you?
Very good. Sorry, I'm on mute. I'm not sure we're not interrupting people, but
No, not yet. I don't think it began. Maybe. All right, we'll stop.
Is
Talk
possible.
later.
We just finally have to take action. Currently, 700 million people are suffering from hunger. The World Food Programme estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic alone will increase the number by 130 million.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Partnering to Transform Food Systems Globally. I am Femi Oke. I am your host for this GAF SP Replenishment Funding event. So what are we doing here? Well, it's all about SDG 2, Zero Hunger by 2030. How do we get there? What is that journey like? We're all talking about action today, not theory, actual action, and then also a little bit about the funding as well. This event will be in French and also in English as well. Bonjour tout le monde, ça va? I hope you're really well. And today is a big day if you are working with GAF SP for either a funder or you're a donor or you're a partner, because our focus is on partnership and collaboration. And in the spirit of partnership, I am going to share the opening for our event with the federal German government minister, Mr. Gerd Müller. Minister, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, zero hunger. This is our common goal. Scientists confirm that a world without hunger is possible. We just finally have to take action. Currently, 700 million people are suffering from hunger. The World Food Programme estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic alone will increase the number by 130 million. We must not let this happen. We have to support our partner countries, making food and agriculture systems stronger and climate resilient, increasing productivity while ensuring the best possible protection of soil and water, and developing value chains and creating more jobs in rural regions. To that end, we have to combine our forces. The GAFSP partners are partners against hunger. GAFSP was founded during a crisis and has been successful in crisis. It was the answer to the global financial and economic crisis in 2008 and to rising food prices. In the current COVID-19 crisis, GAFSP has shown again that it can respond by quickly providing seeds for smallholders through local producers' organizations. This will secure their next harvest. Today, we are launching the replenishment of GAFSP. Considerable investment is needed. Germany will do its share, and I am happy to announce that we will contribute more than 200 million euro to the 2020-2025 replenishment. I also count on your support for zero hunger. A world without hunger is possible. Let's do it. Thank you so much.
I have no doubt the Minister is going to be on Twitter any moment now. Let's do it on Twitter. All right, the hashtag is Invest Farm to Fork. That's the hashtag you need to look for. And then also, if you're on Twitter, look out at GAFSP Fund, and all the good tweets will be there. You can retweet them, share them, comment on them. And while I'm talking about commenting, this is our conversation, okay? You're in this with me. It's all about partnering and collaboration, and we are going to collaborate together. If you've got questions for anything that you've seen, any of the videos that you will see, any of the guests and the speakers you will see, put your comments, put your questions in the Q&A section, and the GAFSP team will be looking for them and bring them right here into our event. So we have two parts to our event. The first part is really looking at the crisis surrounding SDG 2. How do we get there in 10 years, the decade of action? The second part is looking at donors and also partners, stakeholders, and the work of GAFSP so that you can work out that it is an organization where you want to place your well-earned money to invest. All right, all about farmers. Let's start with the farmers. Take a look.
Even before COVID-19, farmers were struggling and food systems were under stress. Swarms of locusts have decimated food production. Conflict has disrupted the agriculture value chain. And more frequent extreme weather events are reducing productivity. All this has a disproportionate effect on smallholder farmers who produce 80% of the world's safe, healthy, and affordable food. Today's obstacles require a better approach, where we put farmers at the heart of everything we do. Farmers are innovators and entrepreneurs, and we need to invest in their success. Since 2010, we've channeled $1.6 billion to farmer-centric projects in over 45 of the world's poorest countries. We address nutrition, climate change, conflict, and gender inequality to build resilience for farmers and their families. In Honduras, we introduced high-value crops and expanded non-farm income. Today, 10,000 families are more food secure. In Bhutan, we're supporting a hazelnut export operation that will benefit more than 10% of the population. In Senegal, local partners are improving sustainable farming practices. Today, better soil quality and irrigation management have increased yield, incomes, and quality of life. It's time to redouble our efforts to transform food systems and ensure food security, to build the resilience of smallholder farmers who are at the forefront of everything we do. Will you join us?
If you work in the field of food and nutrition, I know you have seen, you have heard, you've probably spoken many times about FAO's State of Food Security and Nutrition Report, also known as SOFI. It is so relevant to SDG 2 and how we reach our final goal. It will also feature in the way that we start off our presentations today. And I'm going to hand over to the presenter who will introduce himself. So I will literally say he needs no introduction, because he does it himself. Take a look.
My name is Máximo Torero. I am the Chief Economist of FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. In 2019, we have 690 million people undernourished, 10 million people more than the previous year, and 60 million people more than 5 years ago. At the same time, 2 billion people couldn't access regular diets, and 3 billion people couldn't have access to healthy diets. And all this even before COVID-19. What this means is that we are off path and off track of achieving SDG 2. And this is, of course, before COVID-19. At FAO, we have been trying to analyze and understand what are the drivers behind what is happening in terms of undernourishment. And we have identified 4 core drivers that affect the levels of undernourishment. The first one is climate variability and extremes. The second one is conflict. The third one is economic slowdowns, and the fourth one is surprises, unexpected events, like the case of COVID-19, which affect the sector and affect the levels of undernourishment substantially. Why climate is so important? Because agriculture happens in rural areas, and it depends on weather. Most of the agriculture of smallholders is based on rainfall, and is based on temperatures. So any extreme situation, any increase in variability of temperatures will affect farmers. And the effect will vary depending on how vulnerable you are to weather. And the picture you have seen, the graph you can see, is a graph that shows the level of undernourishment and how it correlates to different levels of exposure to climate. The dotted line represents the lower levels of exposure, while all the other colored lines represent the higher levels of exposure. And as you can see, the more the exposure, the higher the levels of undernourishment. The second element is conflict and civil unrest. We have seen a significant increase in the level of conflict in the last years, but we also have seen an increase in the complexity of the type of conflict. And more than half of the people that are undernourished live in countries starting with some form of conflict. So conflict has become one of the major causes behind the increase of the levels of undernourishment. And that's something that we need to think carefully because it's very complex to solve. The third element is economic recessions and slowdowns. This is another great threat to hunger, irrespective of whether it is the result of market swings, trade wars, political unrest, or global pandemics, such as the COVID-19. Most of countries where hunger has increased have experienced economic slowdowns or recessions. And the figure shows the countries that experience an increase in hunger with economic slowdowns and downturns. And out of 77 countries that experience a rise in hunger, 65 saw an economic slowdown or contraction. So economic slowdowns and downturns challenge access to food, as they often led to rises of unemployment, as we are observing today, for example, with the case of COVID-19. So people access to food will be affected. It could be that food is available, but the access will be the one affected. Finally, the effect of surprise, COVID-19. So what will happen? FAO has been working intensively in trying to understand and simulate what will be the numbers of undernourishment in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. And our estimations show that the numbers could increase between 83 to 132 million people of undernourishment by 2020. This means that by 2030, we could be around 900 million people undernourished, very far from our SDG 2 target. And that's because of this surprise, COVID-19. And this is also the result of a recession. We are going to face a significant recession. GDP at the world level is going to decline in minus 4.9%, according to the IMF. And all countries in the world are going through a deep recession. As a result, this will increase the numbers of poverty to more than 100 million people moving into extreme poverty. A decade will be lost. And that, of course, has a correlate in the levels of undernourishment. That's why our prediction that we will have up to 132 million people moving into undernourishment. Now, the other major concern is that all these drivers also help to one thing, increase of inequalities. And that's something that we need to work on. Because the only way we can move households, individuals out of poverty in a sustainable way is by reduction of inequality. And what we are observing in all these drivers is that we increase inequality. Even in COVID-19, we expect a significant increase of inequality, not only between developed and developed countries, but also within countries. The ones who have access more to assets will be able to cope better. The ones with less access to assets will be able to cope less. Therefore, this could even exacerbate more the situation and make it less sustainable for the future. So what this means, we are in this environment that, as this map can show, we cannot access to healthy diets. That means that households don't have capacity to afford healthy diets. 3 billion people cannot afford healthy diets, and most of them are in Africa, as you can see in the dark red shaded areas of the sub-Saharan Africa continent. Around 75 to 100% of the people cannot afford a healthy diet. So we are in a deep trouble situation, and we need to find a solution. And the only way we can find a solution is to transform the food systems. And to be able to be efficient and gain opportunities, take COVID-19 as a way to obtain opportunities to build back better. And the only way we can do that is to target better the most vulnerable, to find innovative ways to target them, to provide more employment, but more employment through public works programs that will help at the same time to build infrastructure that will be linked to productive sectors. We need also to reactivate economies. We need also to help smallholders to integrate and have access to markets. We need to increase trade, because trade increases efficiency of allocation of resources. But especially, we need to increase intra-regional trade. Why? Because that's a huge opportunity to cope with the recession. Africa, for example, has enormous potential of intra-regional trade, and they already have agreed into reduction of tariffs within the region. But the major problem today is infrastructure and non-tariff barriers. Infrastructure will require investment, but non-tariff barriers will also require an improvement on the food safety measures. And that's why we need to set up initiatives like the Pan-African Food Safety Agency to be able to accelerate the process. But clearly, to be able to cope with the pandemic that we're coping today and the fragility of our work, we have to make our food systems, agri-food systems, more resilient. But we have to start today to reform our food systems, to transform them into more efficient food systems and inclusive, efficient food systems, to promote global value chains which are inclusive, to reduce food loss and waste, to increase the resilience to weather, and to be able to give what farmers need to be able to have a system in which they operate, which is more resilient. GAF-FSP plays a crucial role on this. And I hope, with the support of GAF-FSP, we can target better investments to create the change that is needed so that we don't face the same number of undernourished people in the future, and that we can afford and achieve SDG 2. Thank you very much.
Did just there. He presented a very clear-eyed view of the problem, and it was a pretty heavy problem, deep problem, as Maximo described it. And then he transitioned into, but this is what we need to do. This is how we fix this. This is how we get to a solution, all in the same presentation. Maximo, thank you. Money is a big deal. It is, how do you fund this? If you have a bold ambition, the SDGs are a bold ambition anyway, but zero hunger in the next 10 years, who pays for it? How do we pay for it? This is what has been exercising the brains of the Ceres 2030 team. In a moment, you will hear from Ms. Jerome Portiello, but first, let's take a look at Ceres 2030 and what they've been doing. So this goes straight to Jaron, it doesn't come back to me.
Hello, my name is Jaren Porciello, and I'm here on behalf of Ceres 2030 Sustainable Solutions to End Hunger. We're a team of 3 partners, the International Food Policy Research Institute, Cornell University, where I'm based, and the International Institute for Sustainable Development. It is an honor to be here today, and thank you for the invitation. And congratulations to our colleagues at the GAF-SP on their launch, partnering to transform food systems globally. Ceres 2030 is a research project designed to support the United Nations 2030 Agenda, in particular, SDG 2. We focused on 2 questions. First, what are the most effective ways to end hunger, increase the incomes of poor farmers, and protect the climate? And second, what would it cost? The project involved a global network of 84 researchers from 25 countries who reviewed more than 100,000 articles and ran hundreds of thousands of equations to answer these 2 questions. We were guided by a board of 20 leading food and science agricultural experts, and we partnered with the scientific journal Nature Research. Yesterday, Nature published our collection, Sustainable Solutions to End Hunger, which has 10 open access articles describing effective interventions to improve the livelihoods of small-scale producers. These findings are specific and they are concrete. We also developed an artificial intelligence model to analyze 500,000 articles from the past 20 years of agricultural development. And then we worked with 8 teams of researchers to synthesize all of that evidence and turn them into publishable, actionable evidence. We integrated all of those findings into a sophisticated economic model to estimate the costs. We grouped these findings into a portfolio of interventions that constantly interact and reinforce each other. First, we looked at interventions on the farm that directly improve productivity and incomes. Second, we looked at investments to improve storage and services that farmers need to move food to markets. And third, the research was unanimous that if we want any of this to work, that we need to empower the excluded by ensuring that every person has a right to education, a decent livelihood, and a political voice. We had an important wake-up call when we looked at all these findings together. No matter the intervention that we chose, they were most effective for people who already had some basic access to capital. And this means all capital. Social capital, like networks and being members of farmers' organizations, human capital, like education and vocational training, and financial capital, access to credit, access to insurance. A minimum threshold matters, because only then do investments work to their full capacity. And so now the big question, what will it cost? We found that donors need to give an extra $14 billion per year from now until 2030. What this means is that donors need to double their current spending on food security and nutrition. And the governments of low and middle income countries also need to make contributions. They need to provide an additional $19 billion per year by mobilizing domestic resources. This is a fraction of the amount of money being spent in response to COVID-19, but the gains will be tremendous. It would remove almost 500 million people from the daily experience of hunger and double the incomes of 545 million small-scale producers. Importantly, it would also generate an additional $52 billion in private investment per year in the agriculture and food sectors. Thank you for letting us be with you today, and congratulations to our colleagues on their launch. We look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Jaron. Thank you very much. Also, this is a conversation amongst all of us. So if you're on Twitter, invest from fork to farm. That is the Twitter hashtag. If you're on our platforms, then you can just jump into the comment section, jump into the Q&A section. I've seen 1 or 2 questions already that I'm going to bring to the panel. But again, if you've got thoughts about the presentations that you're seeing, you want to be part of it, are we missing something? How do we transform food systems by partnering in collaboration in time for 2030. How do we do that? Your suggestions, very welcome. Your examples, very, very welcome. This idea of partnering, collaboration, for many organizations, it is very, very challenging. How do you get the best out of both organizations or multiple organizations, the culture amongst those organizations? That is where our next presenter comes in, talking about the how, talking about the value of presentations. Hello, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, my name's Dave Prescott. I'm Creative Director with the Partnering Initiative, or TPI. I'm going to be talking about the role of multi-stakeholder partnering in food systems transformation. I wanted to begin by presenting two different views of the same situation. First, let's imagine a group of smallholder farmers in a remote area working at subsistence level. Even in a good season, they're not eating well because they sell what they are able to grow. Their health is poor. Meanwhile, in response to this situation, there's a lot of uncoordinated and often fairly expensive external inputs to try and improve things. Some of these inputs are effective and progress is certainly being made, at least in the short term, but it's not getting to the roots of the problem. Let's reimagine the same situation in another way. Smallholder farmers are at the centre of a complex network of social, environmental and economic structures and systems that operate at multiple levels and scales. The smallholders bring unique knowledge of their local communities and local politics. They have unique heritage and capacities, unique knowledge of local markets and local diets. They're feeling increasingly frustrated and disempowered by structural factors over which they feel they have no control, leading to poor health and financial insecurity, even though they're literally feeding the world. Fortunately, there are other actors at local, national and global levels. These actors understand the need to work collaboratively with one another, and their organisations also have the internal structures and capacities to enable close coordination so that interventions are locally appropriate, and they are learning to connect specific local issues to broader national or even global issues. But first, let me zoom out to global level. The SDGs reflect the interconnectedness of the world's agenda and provide really the only global blueprint that we have for making progress in an interconnected way. The mindset shift required by the SDGs is still only just starting to happen at scale. This diagram is our summary of the absolutely fundamental differences in approach between the MDGs and the SDGs. We're all starting to shift to the right-hand side of this table, and it's a way of working that can be achieved, and it certainly sounds like GAFSP is rapidly moving this direction. So to return to the second scenario that I sketched out above, a single individual or small group of individuals in a given location is where you can most effectively and most meaningfully identify and learn from the connections between food, health, water, finance, economics, land rights, and so on. In systems transformation, it's necessary to place a local and context-specific set of needs and opportunities at the centre, and to build a learning and support system at national and global level in support of these locally identified needs and opportunities. By starting at local level, it's also possible to use an effective partnering approach in order to transform a food system. Through partnering, it is possible to move this to a more sustainable system. This requires reimagining smallholders as centrally involved partners who are empowered and supported for as long as it takes to identify their own context-appropriate solutions. By bringing in a diverse group of actors who are also interested in working with and learning from the smallholders, it enables access to a whole range of system levers which no single actor operating by themselves can effectively apply. These system levers might be access to finance or health insurance, or access to water efficiency technology, or linkages with global markets through value-added manufacturing processes and the guarantee of a fair price, whatever is required to respond to the needs of that specific context. And through building trust, through listening and taking a flexible, adaptable approach, resources can be combined in ways that haven't been previously done. Also, part of what it requires is to work with diverse people and organisations with whom we might not necessarily think of in relation to our particular area of focus. So at TPI, when we did some work recently with the Sun Business Network, we found that they're developing some really interesting relationships with global agri-food businesses who provide technical assistance to small and medium-sized enterprises. It became clear that the capacity of large companies to support smaller companies in this way is enormous, and their motivation to do so significant because they want stable supply chains. We know that multi-stakeholder partnering, whatever the context, requires certain essential factors, success factors, or building blocks. And there's a good body of work to show what this looks like in practice. We also know that the most effective partnerships bring together organizations that are themselves set up for collaboration. Their internal structures and systems enable and facilitate collaborative working. Within these organizations, we need people with the skills, capacities, and mindset. We describe these as must-have competences: the mindset to work collaboratively, an understanding of other sectors and stakeholders, the skills to build relationships, and the technical knowledge to know how to put a partnership together. Partnerships should be set up to create value that can't otherwise be created, with collaborative partner organizations that bring together individuals with the right skill set and mindset. The last point I wanted to make is that our culture, whether it's the local food production system or a group of governments, tends to promote competition rather than collaboration, which is why we often find ourselves operating with self-preservation as our motivating force, rather than connection and relationship building. Being effective at partnering is still countercultural. However, in my experience, I found that people are natural collaborators. I call myself creative director because I start from the assumption that all the resources, ideas, projects, and people needed to solve the world's biggest problems are already available, but they just need to be combined more effectively. I found this a really liberating to work, not always looking for the next new thing, but reimagining what already exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave Prescott. So you're watching Partnering to Transform Food Systems Globally. It's a GAF SP Replenishment Fund event. And now we're going to live the title. We can't just have the title without living the title. I want to introduce you to our panel speakers. Ibrahima, make yourself known. I'm going to throw them all up so you can see this think tank of knowledge we have. Gilbert, Claudia, Agnes, and they're all going to do their own introductions, so their introductions will be fabulous. This is a good point. If you don't speak fluent French, this is a good point in which to actually activate your interpretation, because Ibrahima is going to be speaking to us in French, and I'm going to get all of our guests to actually introduce themselves. Ibrahima, welcome. Tell everybody who you are. Why are you important in this conversation?
Merci.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Ibrahima. As was announced, I am a farmer in Mali, president of different farmer organizations. And I'm heading this network throughout West Africa. I participate in these discussions, be it pertaining to food at different levels in rural areas. So I also a part of the board of directors. The sound is imperfect, says the interpreter. It's sort of wafts in and out a little bit at times.
You are battling with the sound. It is a live event, so that's one of our challenges. Thank you for that splendid introduction. Gilbert, really good to see you. How would you like to introduce yourself on this occasion, in this event, talking about food systems and collaboration?
Thank you so much, Femi. My name is Gilbert Congo. I'm the president of the International Fund for Agriculture and Development. We are in the development business, we are in agriculture business, and we are in smallholder business. So you can imagine the great interest that I have in being here today. And congratulations to this successful launch of GASP Replenishment. Over to you, Femi.
Thank you very much. That is the true spirit of collaboration there, because Gilbert, he could be seen as another organisation that is grappling for the funds, and he's now saying congratulations on GAFSP launching their replenishment campaign. So that is great. That's the spirit of collaboration right there. Let me say hello to Claudia. Claudia has an amazing resume. Claudia, what are you going to pick from your resume to stun our audience with? What is going to be relevant for today's conversation? Welcome.
Thank you, Femi. It's such a pleasure to be with everyone today. I'm currently the Managing Director for Research, Delivery, and Impact of the CGIR, and it's marvelous to be part of a partnership discussion because for those of you who may not be familiar with the CGIR, we are the world's largest global agricultural research and innovation network. We have been active for over 50 years now and have a global presence today of over 10,000 people in 70 different countries. We're a network and a partnership even within the CGIR, and a partnership that has been working directly with national agricultural research institutions, farmer groups, NGOs, academia, global institutions in the field, working for small-scale farmers for many, many years now. So delighted to be here with such a like-minded group working so hard for food security and poverty alleviation. Thank you.
You're so welcome. One more panelist to get her to introduce herself because her resume is, like all of our panel, this wide. So I said, how do you want to talk to our audience today? What do you want to share with them about you that makes you so critical to the conversation? Agnes, what did you work out? Go ahead, welcome.
Thank you, Femi, for that introduction. I come here today in two capacities. I work with smallholder farmer like Jill Bell. I love that job. I believe, like I was said earlier, that it's actually possible to get people out of poverty. And I have worked with the GAFSP in this capacity. And I believe that in addition to funds, probably the most other important thing is partnerships. So that's the one hat. The other hat is my role as special envoy and how, as we go into the Food System Summit, we need to discuss and think through the type of partnerships we need to deliver all the SDGs that we need to deliver against. So in each case, when I'm going to speak, I'll tell you which hat I'm wearing.
All right, thank you. Very organized there. I can see you, panel, out of the side of my eye. I can see all of you there, all sitting there, standing by on the Zoom. So when you have something to say, if you're not jumping in, I will just watch your body language and bring you in anyway. This idea, and also audience, I see you too. I see your comments. Drop them into the Q&A section and they will come right back here into the GAF-SP Replenishment Studio. All right, so this is the first thought here about multi-stakeholder partnerships. The assumption, we come to this conversation assuming that they're a good idea and that they help with something as bold as SDG 2. Gilbert, you start. Is that assumption right, that they are very helpful in terms of creating a journey and a mission?
You're on mute, Gilbert. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. Greeting to all of you, and thank you for having us here today, Femi. I have been very fascinated from when I was going through the document before this session, and also by watching the presentation, and quite frankly, starting from the introductory remark made by Minister Muller, and the presentation from Ceres. Is very crucial for us to keep in mind that doubling our impact, doubling what we are doing between now and 2030 is the only way for us to get close for achieving the SDG 2. And to do that, we know the gap is so big. We talk about 33 billion a year additional financing. So that gap is so big that we can only do it by doing the partnership. So the point for me, not only is the partnership at a different level, just like we also saw from the partnership presentation, we have to look at that from the producers level, at the smallholders, the farmer organization, partnership also between government or within government at the regional level. I believe the point was making that instead of being in a competition, you have to be in a collaboration. I believe that's a very powerful statement, but also partnership with development actors like us, like GAFSP, like the World Bank, like AGRA, and others. So, and that partnership is certainly not a competition because there's so much to do. So my point is, how do we maximize this partnership by having a better cooperation and a better collaboration way, so we complement each other in a way to create the best results. This is really the other part of the challenge.
Yeah,
And when you look at the Gatsby model, which is a quite very useful, very relevant model for the development actors through the targeting. You can see that the targeting are so complementary. What they're doing, of course, IFAD work a lot with Gatsby, so it's complementing with IFAD, with IFC, with the World Bank, and through the private sector window, and etc. So to be short, is a partnership at different levels that you have to look at it, and above all, how do we put cooperation and collaboration in a way to maximize the impact of such a partnership? Over to you, Femi.
Gilbert, those are big questions to be asking 10 years out of the end of SDG 2. Claudia, let me bring you in here, because it's really about how do you effectively make those partnerships work. It's something that your organization right now is really reviewing and looking at and planning ahead for the next decade. What can you share with us that isn't too confidential, that you feel that will help all of us do the same thing? Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Femi.
I'm going to go to Claudia now, Gilbert. I'll come right back to you.
Thanks so much, Femi. Well, at the CGR right now, we are beginning a period of reform, which really builds exactly on the challenges that we're discussing here today. How to bring all of the different capacities, knowledge bases, physical assets, and access that we have together more effectively to make a difference and to work toward the 2030 goals. I think, everything Gilbert has said is so important about the scale of the task ahead of us and how much partnership is needed to address those challenges. Also, the nature of our work, I think, is really changing. The way we look at food systems now is not simply on farm. The connectivity that we see is extraordinary, and COVID has really highlighted a lot of the ways in which the global connectivity of our challenges are so complex. So at this point, the range of interdisciplinary work, the range of scientific expertise, the range of local contextual issues, of political economy, of hydroclimatic specificity in the ways that we work, all of those new areas of knowledge and science that need to be brought together are coming very much to the fore. So for example, with the CG in response to COVID, we have created a COVID response hub that brings together all of the capacities of the CG, but also partners directly with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So it's interesting to see the new partnerships that are arising to address these complex challenges. Within the CG specifically, we're entering a reform period. We're calling it One CG, where we're actually undergoing governance changes and structural changes within the CG to create a much more cohesive and we expect impactful and influential system, also one that can be a much better partner to all of you that we're speaking toward today, because we'll be organized in a way that helps diminish the transaction costs of partnership, which is something we may talk about here today, the complexity of working together over so many different topics
Claudia,
so many different spaces.
Would you mind digging into that?
Thanks.
Because I think that's what people are listening to. They are thinking, this is hard, and then it's going to cost us money. I like the way you put it, though, transaction costs. That was really nicely put. What does that mean? Give us an example.
Simply finding the right partners in the right places with the right expertise is something that's very difficult. So in the CG, for example, we have historically been a network of most recently 15 different global centers that work on different commodity crops, on different hydroclimatic zones, on different natural resource spaces, water, forestry, fish, livestock, and different commodities. How do you find the right partner on the right topic to work in the right region. And creating one CG by creating a more cohesive group, sort of the front door, a one-stop shop, we hope that we can lower some of these transaction costs of finding the right partner in the right place to help get the jobs done.
What I am not hearing, and I would love to do this, is I'm not hearing on the ground examples. I'm hearing up here, because our panel are very important people. So I'm hearing up here, like the big issues here, the big challenges. I'm not actually hearing any examples of what's happening down on the ground. Agnes, can you help us with that?
Thank you, Femi. And so here I'm wearing my my hat as the president of AGRA, where we work with smallholder farmers. And unfortunately, Femi, when you look at the poverty levels we are talking about, smallholder farmers in the developing world are contributing significantly to poverty. So despite the land they are sitting on, despite the labor that they have in their hands, despite the opportunities, for example, in Africa for growing markets, and even if you say in Asia, South Asia, markets are growing, farmers are not benefiting from these opportunities. And I would say that there are three things that we have to look at that will call for partnerships. These farmers need governments to work for them the most, need institutions to work for them the most. They live in places, unfortunately, they live in places where institutional capacity are some of the weakest in the world. These farmers need private sector to deliver services to them because they are underserved in many cases. Unfortunately, private sector is struggling to get to them because of some of the challenges that Claudia is talking about. How do you get good technologies to farmers somewhere, where road access is difficult? Where institutional capacity to deliver research outcomes is difficult. So that's another problem. But also we want, for these farmers, we want the development world to work, like Jill Bell was talking about. But what we have on the ground today is these things are not working enough. So we need to double down if we are going to be able to serve these farmers and be able to come through on zero hunger. So what happens is these things need to come together in partnerships. There's no one institution out there, no one partner out there that is going to be able to deliver game-changing numbers within the poverty perspective that we are seeing today, within the zero hunger numbers we are seeing today. But we can do it together. When governments do work well, when research institutions, local research institutions do work well and have capability to take on the results coming from the CGIR, when private sector has the capacity to turn these opportunities into businesses, and when the whole landscape has the appropriate levels of funding. This is what I saw with GAF-SP. When I was in Rwanda, we were one of the first countries that received the first GAF-SP funding. And it unlocked, it was a $50 million project, but it unlocked $500 million worth of project from government itself, from other development partners, from other development institutions like IFAD, and really we designed a huge transformative program that had better capability to reach farmers with seed, to reach farmers with changing their land. In Rwanda, land is so many hills, and terracing the land was very important. Being able to do some of the programs on the ground that were very critical to changing farmers' lives, but also contributing to building a capital base for these farmers as you transition and take resources to them. You see them building the capital base, but you also see SMEs developing in these landscapes. And we've seen all these things happening through the partnerships we are seeing with on the ground. We are seeing farmers actually using agricultural productivity, increase the agricultural productivity to get out of poverty. So to be able to do this, there's no single institution that can do it. Again, we need private sector to come together. We need research institutions to stay on top of what we need. We need governments to do their own investments, not just in funds, but in policies, in policy reforms, and in inclusion. Inclusion is probably one of the most important things that we don't think about a lot. So that would be my take here.
We have lost Ibrahima. We have lost him to the vagaries of the internet systems. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get him back into our conversation. That is why I'm not going to him next. All right, Claudia, in the spirit of collaboration and honesty and candor, ask one of your fellow panelists a pertinent question about transforming food systems, but collaboratively. Pick one, I was going to say, pick a victim, pick a volunteer. Claudia, ask them a pertinent question. Go ahead.
Oh dear. I would love to speak to Agnes and this extraordinary opportunity that you have, that we all have through the UN Food Systems Summit. My question really with the Food Systems Summit, it gives us such an important platform to raise the visibility of the breadth and the centrality of food systems to so many of the challenges that we're looking at today, not just hunger, but sustainability, climate adaptation, equity, inclusive growth. How is it that we can really very best use the Food Systems Summit to reach out and build partnerships and raise the momentum that we need to transform food systems? I'm personally very excited about the summit and would love to hear more about it from you.
So thank you. So that's an extremely important question. So the Food Systems Summit comes with a number of opportunities. Probably the most important opportunity is that it's a UN-led summit, meaning that it has the ability to draw in countries in new ways, in ways that that we would usually, as individual partners, not be able to do. We would not be able to draw these countries in together. It has the ability to draw in all sorts of partnerships, but it also has huge reach in terms of the number of engagements you can do. And that's exactly what we are doing. We have now designed action tracks, which are going to be the places where you engage around what is going to be transformative. What does the world have to offer? So through action tracks, we will look at what the world has to offer with regards to game-changing ideas. And those game-changing ideas then get pressure tested, looked at for scaling capability, and then once approved as this is where we go, then we can talk. Then you know that once you get something like that, you actually have global buy-in. So that's probably one of the most important things. Then we have the food systems dialogue. The food systems dialogue, which we are actually launching this week, we are launching global dialogues, is an opportunity for everybody to engage. So we are launching them at country level, and this presents an opportunity for countries to engage, recognizing fully well that food is a very local context. Food systems is a local context. We are impacting food systems locally, we are being impacted locally, and we need to look at the local context in which these things are happening and give people an opportunity to discuss what they are doing right and what they are doing wrong, but also what corrective actions they want to take in their food system. So that happens in the dialogues. But we also have the scientific group, which I hope, Claudia, you and the whole of the CGIR are part of, because the scientific group is looking at what opportunities, what is the evidence for where we are coming from? I mean, where are we coming from and what's the evidence for where we are going? What should we be taking forward? What do we need to take forward? What do we need to leave behind because it no longer makes sense? How we were producing food yesterday that doesn't make sense, that probably needs to be left behind. So there are all these things that are happening, but probably the two most important things of this summit that also links to what we are talking about today is the fact that it must engage nearly everybody. Changing our food system is going to have to be a personal decision as well. We make decisions 3 times a day to eat, and those decisions impact how we produce food, how food gets on our table. So it has to be a summit that has capacity to reach nearly everybody, and that's how we are designing it. But it also has to be a solution summit. You all in the CGIR are sitting with lots of solutions that we don't have visibility of, maybe we do. But so are other institutions that have so much that we can take forward that has already been tested and tried. How do we take that forward? How do we ensure that these solutions can actually happen? But we need resources. And that's why I love the conversation that is already happening here, that we actually think through how we are going to fund where we are going, because we are off track on SDGs, nearly all of them.
Gilbert is looking so thoughtful right now. He's sitting in his chair like this. Thoughts? rattling around in his brain. Gilbert, share one of them with us. What were you thinking about this whole idea, this journey to SDG2? Can we do it together?
Yeah, I honestly believe that between now and 2030, we really need to keep a momentum very, very high. So the point that Claudia and Agnes were touching in terms of the opportunity of the Food System Summit is an important one. In addition to that, to be able to keep that momentum, you see, let's face it, the challenge we have is to be able to get, if I take ODA, for example, to get ODA start going up more than 5% of to agriculture. When IFAD was created in 1977, 15 to 20% of ODA were going to agriculture, and today barely 5%. So we really need to spread that up, which is one important thing for me. In addition, bringing the private sector, Agnes mentioned that, and not only bringing the private sector, by the way, just from a resource mobilization perspective, but bringing the private sector also from a knowledge sharing and making sure that when you talk about increasing the productivity on the ground, so to increase the income of the small scale producers, we're going to need digital solutions where the private sector is going to be an important one. The other side is the soft side, where Sarah's presentation was quite very eloquent on that. To make sure that the small scale producers, they are better organized through the farmer organization, to ensure that the extension services are effective, and to ensure that they have a voice, a political voice, is going to be crucial. This is almost a sine qua non condition for the inclusion that we're talking about. And the COVID current situation, what is demonstrating on the ground, you were referring to a concrete example on the ground. What is demonstrating is that lack of that inclusion or lack thereof is causing even much more problem and accelerating, pushing people back to extreme poverty. And you may want to remember also the presentation made by FAO, by Torero, where we talk about the inequalities within countries. So all of those are different type of challenges. On one hand, I hope that we will be able to get the solution or some of the solution through the Food System Summit. But it is also important that, and this will be my last point to answer your question, it's going to be important to ensure that each sector or each institution, where is or are the comparative advantages, and those comparative advantages kind of are very much aligned and together, back to my first point, maximizing the impact. For example, if we take Gatsby trying to target not only the public window, but the private sector window, trying to target the low-income country on the grant-based business. You have IFAD that will mix a concessional loan approach with a reflow coming back and increasing what you could do later on. But that complements very well with Gatsby. Then you can see the World Bank with a huge infrastructure project which can complement the tertiary level of local investment that IFAD will be doing, etc., etc. If you take the research word, is the same. I like the word used by Agnes or almost as telling Claudio that a lot of what the CGI are doing is not always very well known. For example, and how do we make that better known and apply it, we that are on the ground, and making sure that we can put that to the benefit of the smallholders. So that complementarity, I think, is going to also be crucial in addition to the resource dimension. Over.
Thank you, audience, for watching and staying with our conversation. We're looking at partnership to transform food systems, global food systems. The aim of that is to get to SDG 2. zero hunger by 2030. Questions, your questions for the panel. Okay, impressive presentation, thank you. Will COVID-19 serve as an opportunity to make the global food system better than before? Claudia, you start, then Agnes, and then Gilbert. Could COVID-19 improve food systems, Claudia?
It's a great question. And I think the answer lies with our response. I think that this is, COVID is a wonderful wake-up call. It's a terrible tragedy, but it's an important wake-up call. And it's interesting this week, as you all know, and a huge congratulations to our colleagues at the World Food Program. The World Food Program won the Nobel Peace Prize this year. 50 years ago, Norman Borlaug won the World Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, for his work on combating hunger and starvation. It's both exciting and also perhaps a little bit heartbreaking that food remains so fundamental, a link in the armor toward peace and stability, right? And we see whenever there are these disruptions, whether these are pandemic, whether it's fragility in a society, whether it's war, migration, and the shocks that we'll be seeing and we are seeing from climate change, that a lot of the fabric that holds us together is food systems. This is absolutely fundamental. So what I'm hoping is that in the learning moment that COVID affords us, there will be a renewed recognition, and I think we're seeing this, of the fundamental, the centrality of food systems to development, to peace, to inclusive growth, to environmental sustainability, and to our resilience and also the mitigation of climate change. So I do think that this is a moment in which we can use the attention that is being focused on a global tragedy toward building back better and really improving our food systems, getting more from them than we ever have. Thank you.
Agnes, what's your take? COVID-19 impact on food systems?
Okay, so COVID-19 is going to have a huge impact on food systems. You heard Maximo saying we'll have 132 million people going hungry in addition to the existing number of people that were already hungry. So huge impact. But I think what it has done, what shows all of us is, and it comes through many of these studies, there's cost to inaction, and probably sometimes even bigger than action, and we have to think about it. When resilience is busy wearing down for communities, and communities get pushed out of their capabilities and get forced to do stuff that they probably wouldn't usually do. When we encroach on systems and we know what needs to be done and we don't do it, definitely all these things have a cost. So I'm hoping that we do understand that we can avoid some of these costs by ensuring that we are working on the world on reducing vulnerability, on strengthening resilience of communities that really find themselves in challenging environments, but also on reducing hunger, on putting all of us to a trajectory of prosperity. And this is a shared goal, and this is a shared value. It's already embedded in our SDGs. So we need to do that. So to me, as we go into the Food Systems Summit, we must ask ourselves, what is it that we need to be doing? Because sometimes the cost of inaction can be extremely high.
Gilbert, I'm going to give you a different question. Thank you to our audience who are engaging with us today. Gilbert, here's the question. Food crises are on the rise. Is the international community spending or doing enough in response? I wonder if that's a hypothetical question. Gilbert, you take that one.
Could you please repeat the question? The line was breaking a bit, please.
Food crises are on the rise. Is the international community spending and doing enough in response?
Clearly, if the crisis is still there, that means we're not doing enough. That's, for me, the question is quite very, very simple. Are we doing enough with the means we have today? Yes. Can we do more? Yes. So, in as much as the crisis will remain there, that means we're not doing enough. However, it's important, you see, it's important to not forget one dimension. I believe Claudia was referring to the next year's 50 years ago Nobel Prize, and now one of the common points between that is called peace. When you think about it, And when I want to refer back to the presentation made by Torero from FAO, where it was giving some of the underlying causes and conflict, climate change, economic downturn are important drivers for that. So my point is that the development actors that are involved in food or SDG 2, we can increase what we're doing. If globally, the global community is not also working on addressing and the root causes of those climate change and crisis and so forth, the problem can only be growing. So it's important to keep in mind that we have to do more, quite frankly, but we also have to make sure as international community, as a global community, that we also address the other underlying causes of the puzzle. So in other words, when we spend billion to fight crisis, we spend billion for humanitarian relief operations, but we don't spend that much in investments for the development to avert or prevent those crises. And this is one of the things that has to also change. And that is a point that I keep advocating for. We need to keep in mind that it's much more cheaper to invest in peace prevention, in increasing productivity, than it is to address the crisis or the exclusion challenge we have when those issues are not addressed earlier in the game. Over.
Panel, we have 5 more minutes together, so I am going to be sharing the questions with you. I want a brief answer in response so we can get in as many as possible because our audience is sitting there waiting for their questions to be answered. All right, Claudia, I'm going to get this one to you and a brief answer, please. Achieving food security sustainably within planetary boundaries is critical now more than ever. Is it within reach?
I think the clear answer is it must be, and I do believe that it is. I think there are extraordinary advances that are being made simply by looking differently at the way that we manage our food systems. Really exciting discussions going on around agroecology, around nature-positive production. And it seems that when we set our mind to it, we find ways of doing things better. And I think this is part of what I think is quite fundamental to the way that we're looking at food systems today, which is that we're asking more from our food systems, right? Not just hunger, but nutrition. Not just production, but sustainable production and nature-positive production, and creating mixed food systems that help to balance the ecology and sustain our land and water systems, protect our virgin forests, and use nature in more constructive ways. So I'm optimistic that this is an area that we will be able to do much more in. Thanks.
Agnes, I'm going to give this question to you. How can agriculture play a role in addressing climate change challenges?
Thank you, Femi. So what we see today is agriculture from a production perspective does contribute to climate change, does contribute to emissions. From a waste perspective, resulting from agricultural production, we do contribute probably 80% of all agricultural output, but not necessarily at the production level along the value chain. So there's a lot that is happening that is contributing to climate change. And that's probably the most important part of looking at nature positive production. We need to think about, much as we've figured out new ways of producing food, which are those ways of producing food that are not in sync with what our planet needs. We need to identify those, and part of the solution to our problems would be to be able to find those challenges and remove them. But there are also ways we know of producing food that are more in line with where we are going, that are more in line with our planetary boundaries, and those areas of those ways of producing food that are in line, that reduce emissions, that reduce waste pollution,
Right.
that reduce pollution of our oceans, of our land, but also reduce the amount of land that is in agriculture unnecessarily, while looking at ways of intensifying production and productivity in very constructive ways that are sustainable for our environment.
Okay.
Someone was saying that we have a continent, an area as big as South America, the land that is degraded from agriculture is as big as South America. That's a huge opportunity in terms of recovering it, because it's even lost to agriculture. It's not being used anymore. We can stop doing more of that. We can rehabilitate what has been wasted, and we can intensify production in productive ways for our environment and in sync with our environment. That's embedded in some of the action tracks that we'll be taking forward as we look at nature positive production in the Food Systems Summit.
We are partnering to transform food systems globally. It is a GAF-SP replenishment event. Thank you for watching. Thank you for those excellent questions. In the spirit of partnership, I'm going to share the last question amongst our three panelists. You only have a line panel, okay? Because we're doing this together. What are the top three things that need to happen in order to make SDG 2 happen? One thing from Gilbert, or one from Agnes, one from Claudia. Gilbert.
Doubling the impact of what we're doing now. Over.
Oh, it's so efficient. I love that. If Gilbert's in charge of SDG 2, we're doing it. We're doing it. It's so efficient. Great answer. Agnes, go ahead. One thing that's needed for SDG 2. Actually, it was three things, but I'm sharing it amongst the panelists. Agnes, go ahead. Ah, we have lost Agnes. Agnes, no, she's here. She's here.
I'm here.
All right, Agnes, stop stalling. Go for it.
Yeah. So we need partnerships with the government, with private sector, with donors. We need to
Staying on message. Fantastic. Agnes, Claudia, the question was name three things. What are the three things we need to do to make SDG 2 happen? I'm sharing amongst all of the panel. Your response is what? What's your one thing? Go ahead.
My one thing is to innovate based on science and partnership, and try to do things differently, try to do things in a way that reach the range of goals that we now have for our food systems, and everything that SDG 2 both implies within it and needs to provide for the other SDGs as well.
I want to see our magnificent panel. Put all of the panel up so you can see them all together. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you, Agnes, as well. Coming to us via Zoom. It worked. And I have to say, it's such a shame that we saw Ibrahim at the very beginning, and he did a fine introduction. He represented farmers. His spirit was with us, but his connection was not. Panel, we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. So
thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. It was great to have you. So the first part of our program was really about setting up the challenge to get to SDG 2, the crisis that we have with our food systems, and how collaboration, partnership, how that may well help. Some solutions there, practical solutions. The second part, as this is a GAF-SP replenishment event, is talking about GAF-SP, the work that they have done, their stakeholders, their collaborators, their partners. Let's get going with the World Bank.
Hello, my name is Martin van Nieuwkoop, and I'm the Global Director for the Agriculture and Food Global Practice at the World Bank Group. It's my pleasure to join you here virtually to officially launch the GAF-SP replenishment period 2020-2025. We are meeting under exceptional circumstances as the world faces unprecedented challenges. And as you heard earlier today, despite all efforts, progress towards SDG 2 is off track, and the amount of resources needed to close the investment gap is massive. This is why food security is high on the World Bank list of priorities. To the World Bank Group IMF annual meetings last week, we convened a food security roundtable attended by ministers of finance to discuss the importance of food security as a foundation for poverty reduction. We discussed the challenges and opportunities to have food systems better contribute to healthy people, a healthy planet, and a healthy economy by mobilizing a range of public and private investments and better aligning food policies with the Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, the World Bank is honored to support the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, serving as the host trustee, and being one of its implementing partners. From GAFSP inception to the present day and into the future, the goal of the program is to help us all engage with farmers, countries, and businesses in a way that is flexible, impactful, and complementary to our own efforts. I'm pleased to say that GAFSP has just done that. 10 years after its creation, GAFSP is a financing instrument with a proven track record of success, deploying over $1.5 billion and contributing to increased incomes, reduced poverty, enhanced resilience, and improved food and nutrition security for more than 13 million people. On average, a 27% income gain has been reported for a number of GAFSP projects that have conducted rigorous impact evaluations. Nonetheless, as we have heard, there remains much to be done, and impactful targeted financing continues to be a critical need, even as we embark on longer-term food systems transformation. At a time of growing concerns about rising food insecurity, and with millions of livelihoods at risk, it is very good to see that GAFSP was already well positioned to support farmers when COVID-19 hit, and is responding directly to the economic damage already felt and further predicted from COVID-19. We heard earlier about the opportunities and challenges of partnership. I can say that GAFSP encourages partners to push the envelope in our field. For instance, it was one of the instruments that pushed us as a World Bank to pay more attention to nutrition and the quality of food in our focus on agriculture, something that has been underlined as critical during this pandemic. Over the next hour, you will learn more about GAFSP and hear what aspects resonate with its stakeholders. It's my pleasure to now introduce a new video that gives an overview of how GAFSP works with its partners. Thank you very much.
Now is the time to focus on farmers in countries with the greatest need and to reimagine our approach so we can end hunger and achieve global food security. Enter the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program. We work with donors, governments, and civil society organizations to support smallholder farmers and their families. We don't implement projects. We channel donor funds through the world's leading development institutions. Together, we help make farmers more resilient and strengthen agriculture systems. Since 2010, we've channeled $1.6 billion from farm to market to table along the entire agriculture value chain in more than 45 of the world's poorest countries. To respond to COVID-19, we fast-tracked over $50 million to hard-hit countries. Our approach is flexible, customized, and responsive, but more important than speed is ownership. Our program is distinctive because farmer organizations help influence decisions. That gives countries and farmers more opportunity to shape project investments and find solutions that work. And for donors and implementing partners, that helps make project design and implementation better. There are 3 ways that we invest. First, we give large grants to countries to empower and finance their country strategies. Second, we provide technical and financing knowledge, expertise, and investment tools. Third, we invest in farmer organizations to reach people directly. Our projects address climate change, conflict, nutrition, and gender inequality. Low-income countries are already bearing the brunt of climate impacts. 80% of our projects contribute to climate solutions for farmers. Conflict is making things worse in many countries. More than half of our funds have gone to fragile and conflict-affected countries. When women farmers are not empowered, productivity and health suffer. 90% of our public sector investments have specific gender components. Today, more than ever, investment in agriculture is critical. Let's come together, focus on farmers, and transform global food systems. Together, we can achieve global food security and end hunger.
So as you see from that video, GAF-SP is a financial tool, a financing tool that can really help end global hunger when used in the right places at the right time. In the last 10 years, GAF-SP has done a lot of work around the world. I want to bring in Natasha Hayward. She is the head of programs of GAF-SP, and she will tell you some of that work and give you some examples. Let's check in with Natasha.
Hello, my name is Natasha Hayward, and I'm GAFSP's program head. It's my real pleasure to speak to you here at the official launch of GAFSP's replenishment period. As some of you may know, the G20 launched GAFSP just over a decade ago in response to the 2007-2008 food price crisis. Their vision was not to build another emergency fund, but to support medium to long-term targeted investment in agriculture and food security in the world's poorest countries. Today, our work is more urgent than ever, as increasing global hunger and food insecurity, already compounded by climate change, conflict, and economic instability, are further complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a confluence of challenging events that will have an impact on global food systems for years to come. While GAFSP was quick to respond to COVID-19 by providing additional funding to our ongoing projects, led by both countries and producer organisations, taking advantage of their presence on the ground, we know there is much more that can be done. That's why we're aiming to raise $1.5 billion during this 5-year replenishment period to help smallholder farmers, businesses and countries recover and grow in the medium to long term. GAFSP has worked in 47 countries across Africa, Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean and the Middle East, with more than half of programme funds supporting projects in the most fragile and conflict-affected nations. As a leading global financing vehicle for agriculture and food security, GAFSP has already channeled over $1.6 billion through its implementing partners to where it's needed most along the entire agriculture value chain. From farm to fork, we've allocated $1.3 billion in grants to support national agriculture and food security investment plans. We've also provided $330 million in private sector agribusiness investments, and we've supported producer organisation-led projects with $13.2 million in small-scale grants. Today, over 13 million farmers and their families, including more than 5 million women and girls, now benefit from higher incomes, higher agricultural productivity, and better opportunities for themselves and their communities. And we're building healthier communities too, providing over 1 million people better access to sufficient, safe and healthy foods and nutrition education. We asked some of GAF's partners how these projects have impacted their families, communities, businesses and countries, and this is what they had to say.
কিভাবে টেকসই রাখা যায় সে বিষয়ে প্রশিক্ষণ দিয়েছে, কিভাবে সংগঠনকে প্রধান সমস্যা চিহ্নিত করা যায় সে বিষয়ে হাতে কলমে শিখিয়েছে। আসলে রুরাল ইনভেস্ট টুলটি ব্যবহার করে আমরা ব্যবসা পরিকল্পনা তৈরি করি। এই ব্যবসা পরিকল্পনায় আমাদের পাইকার, কোম্পানি ও সরকারি বেসরকারি বিভিন্ন সংস্থাগুলোর সাথে সভা করি ও যোগাযোগ স্থাপন করি। এখানে সারা বাংলা কৃষক সোসাইটির 20 জন ব্যবসা সহায়ক 55টি সংগঠন কৃষি ব্যবসায় সেবা দিচ্ছে। এমএমআই তহবিল কিভাবে ব্যবহৃত হবে তা আমরাই নির্বাচন করি। এফএও আমাদের চাহিদা মতোই বিভিন্ন সেবা দেয়। ব্যাংক আমাদের সদস্যদের মাঝে জামায়াতবিহীন কৃষি ঋণ দিচ্ছে, আর এটা সম্ভব হয়েছে শুধুমাত্র এমএমআই প্রকল্পের জন্যই। সংগঠনের হিসাব ব্যবস্থাপনার স্বচ্ছতা এসেছে, ফলে আমাদের উপর যেমন তাদের আস্থা বেড়েছে, নিয়মিত সঞ্চয়ে আগ্রহ বেড়েছে। অনেক নারী নেতা আছেন, নারী প্রধান সংগঠনও রয়েছে। আমাদের সকল সংগঠনে 60% বেশি নারী।
নারী হিসেবে আমি সমিতির মোটামুটি ভূমিকা পালন করতেছি। নারী হিসেবে আমি একজন এই সমিতির সাধারণ সম্পাদক। আমাদের সমিতিতে 5টি উপকমিটি আছে, প্রত্যেক উপকমিটিতে একটি করে নারী সদস্য আছে। এমএমআই প্রকল্পে ঢোকার পর আমার পরিবার এবং সমাজে অনেক মূল্য বেড়েছে। আগে এরকম মূল্য ছিল না। নারী হিসাবে এখন আমি প্রত্যেক সমাজে যাইতে পারি এবং সবখানে কথা বলতে পারতেছি, সবার সাথে মিশতে পারছি।
Our interests are largely in coffee, macadamia nut plantations in Malawi. We as a family-run business obviously had certain expertise, but we lacked in certain areas, and this is where IFC and GAF-SP has been a huge plus for us. The next step had to be looking out of our own plantation into the wider community that we were a part of, and to see what value we could add to that community. It is a huge success story for the farming community in Malawi and the outgrow farming that has come about because of the step change that we made from just being a plantation company into extending our resources, our finances, our technology, our know-how into other parts of the country and into the outgrowing community, and encouraging them to come back and be our partners. Over 50% of the people who have actually volunteered to come in and actively get involved are women. Besides that, it's a huge impact and an awareness that has been brought about. It has been a game changer in the sense that you don't just give money to the farmer. You change the whole way of thinking of the farmer. We are actually creating future entrepreneurs who are actually dreaming big, who are thinking big, and we are looking at them from a practical point of view on how to train them for bigger things to come.
Donc il faut dire que la structure de gouvernance même du
We have to say that the governance was very important. First, we used service providers to work with the farmers, whether it was private firms, NGOs, or associations. The project also relied on input and service providers, such as cooperatives and private entrepreneurs. We conducted an impact assessment, and it showed the positive impacts. First, on the number of cultivated plots that led to an increase of the surface that was cultivated and with food crops. And then agricultural production and farmer incomes increased. We also observed a decline in cattle sales, since people who received financing, who were supported financially, did not have to sell their livestock. And that also significantly reduced tree felling, because at that time, especially at harvest time, people tend to cut down trees to sell and earn extra money so that they can participate in the farming seasons.
Partnership with the Global Agriculture, Food and Security Program has been very important for us, because in Honduras, 90% of the agricultural producers are very, very small farmers. It gave us a lot of know-how on how to help the very small producer in Honduras that does not have any access to credit whatsoever, how to train them, how to make them credit worthy. This credit is given in agricultural supply inputs like crop protection products, fertilizers, irrigation equipment, and technical assistance. Also, we have seen that our workforce, our technical people, our credit people have gained so many other capabilities that we didn't have in terms of credit assessment, credit evaluation, and delivery of the credit and follow-up in the field. The satisfaction of the growers is very high. Therefore, we are on the right path. Now, the next step is to go national and then to go regional in Central America.
L'Union Sabati est composée de
The union is comprised of 1,859 members spread over 21 villages. We explained to them that the GAFS MMI project will be set up for local products, especially cowpea bean. Since the announcement of this project, the impact is really there because it enabled young people to not go into exodus, especially to gold panning sites. In return, they will sell their crops through this processing plant. Before the arrival of the GAFS MMI project, the Sabati women's unions had difficulties accessing credit at financial institutions. The GAFS project set up a guarantee fund at the bank level, in particular the BDNA, National Bank for Agricultural Credit, which allowed them to have easy access to credit to be able to finance their production as well as marketing. The project has been beneficial in the life of our community. The project has been beneficial in the life because we women can easily obtain credit and realize our activities. And I appeal to other women.
শুরু থেকে এমএমআই আমাদের পরামর্শ দিয়েছে কিভাবে আমরা করোনা সংক্রমণ থেকে মুক্ত থাকব। এ নিয়ে আমাদের সতর্ক করেছে। যেহেতু আমরা এমএমআই থেকে মোবাইল ব্যবহার শিখেছি, তাৎক্ষণিক কৃষি পণ্য ও উপকরণ ক্রয় ও বিক্রয়ের জন্য ভার্চুয়াল কল সেন্টার করার সিদ্ধান্ত নেই। একসাথে ক্রয় বিক্রয় করে এই দুর্যোগে লাভ হওয়াতে আমরা এই কল সেন্টারকে ভবিষ্যতে কৃষির একমাত্র উপায় হিসেবে ভাবতে শুরু করেছি।
Despite COVID, over the last 9 months, we are actually tracking 240 hectares that has already been completed, that is employing people, that is creating jobs, and that is actually set to take off.
This challenge we have been able to overcome with great planning and with technology. The food supply chain worked during the pandemic cycle since March, and our producers were able to sell their crops, first to harvest their crop, then to sell their crops, and to repay their loans.
You create 10 entrepreneurs in a village, and that influences thousands of people in that village to see that it is possible and it can be done. So the mindset is there, the resources are there, and I think going forward, we see ourselves in a position to make a huge impact in the lives of people who had everything going for them, but somebody had to give them that little extra push, that little extra time. A lot of people have thrown money, but they have not given the project the time or the real values that go behind the business. Financial literacy, knowledge of the plants, knowledge of agriculture, knowledge of water, solar energy. All aspects of the business are being brought into play, and I believe this will be going a long way in making a difference.
One of the details I asked the panel to really focus on a little bit earlier when we were talking about collaboration and partnership and how that may well happen as a strategy and work out as a strategy to get to SDG 2. One of the things I asked them about was details, examples, down on the ground. And because they're such important people, we were up here and I'm down here, like details, 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 which is why we have our next guest on, because they work with GAF SP down on the ground, and they will talk about the projects and that experience and what it's like and what they've been doing. Honourable Janine Cooper, Minister of Agriculture in Liberia, is joining us, and also Mr. Noel Kutera Bataka, former Minister for Agriculture for the Republic of Togo. So we have Togo and Liberia in the house. Great to see you. Minister, let me start with you. It's really great to have you. Very briefly describe the GAF SP projects that are happening in Liberia. Tell us more.
Thank you very much, Femi, and it's a pleasure to be here speaking to you from Monrovia, Liberia, especially because Liberia has been one of the recipients from almost the inception of gas funding under both the public sector investment window and the private sector investment window. We started with a $46.5 million grant in about 2011, 2012. That's just now winding down. And when you talk about examples, the gas, a little bit before even we had the SDG conference and the financing for development, the gas was already looking at ways of bringing on board all of the different stakeholders, including civil society organizations, farmer organizations, governments, private sector. And that's not said enough. So Liberia has benefited from 3 gas projects so far, and we're about to start the 4th one, which I had the privilege. I just become minister about 8 months ago, so I've been very involved in the negotiations of this new smallholder agricultural development for food and nutrition security project that's coming on board in early 2021. And the flexibility, I can't say enough about it, but let me stop there and give an opportunity to my colleague to speak.
Noel, it's really great to have you here representing Togo. Tell us about the projects briefly that are in Togo right now that are funded by GAFSP.
Thank you very much, Feni. It's always a great pleasure to participate in a panel with you. You're such a great moderator. Togo has had the honor of benefit from GAFSP at a critical moment after the food crisis and the economic crisis of 2008. Togo was coming out of a long socio-political crisis and put in place a national plan to invest in agriculture with funding in 2009, and the first projects that the country had piloted, and I was lucky enough to be involved in the preparation. That's how the first call SC was launched, and Togo benefited from this. At the time, we had a food deficit of 17% with GAFSP. We were able to fund $39 million, the project to support agriculture in Togo and to help the agricultural sector, Baza, and the World Bank contributed to this. We were able to avail the small producers kits, what we call the kit starts, and these are seeds, fertilizers, enabled 51,000 households to be able to grow crops and get out of food insecurity. And we supported the organization of producers for smaller rural companies, and we developed value chains. Thanks to this mechanism, Togo was able to significantly reduce the prevalence of nutrition, which so in 2013 and 2015, we were distinguished by the FAO for our exceptional efforts to reduce malnutrition in Togo. So these are concrete results thanks to the reactivity and the funding that GAFSP put in place, and Togo can say that it was part of the countries that needed it most, and GAFSP indeed was able to bring about solutions as quickly as possible that saved thousands of Togolese, and 3,000 producers were able to make it thanks to this financial support.
You've heard from Liberia about the programs that they are doing, have been doing with GAF SP. Let me go back to Liberia, because one of the things the minister said that jumped out at me was the word grant. It wasn't.
You're muted.
It wasn't.
We're not hearing.
Audio for me, please. So one of the things.
Femi, the first part of what you said was muted, so we didn't hear you.
So, Minister, one of the things that jumped out at me when you first spoke was the word grant. It wasn't loan. It wasn't you need to pay this back to us over a period of time. It was the word grant. Explain to me what difference that makes when you are given the funds to execute a project and you don't have to pay the money back.
Thank you. And that's exactly true. And that's one of the really positive aspects of the GASP funding, is that it's been coming in grants. The public sector investment projects that I mentioned, the first one has laid the foundation, but there's a couple of other ones that have come in as private sector investment projects. And I just want to say a little word about those, because that's what's unique. Almost all of the development projects that we have, whether on food security or in the agricultural sector, is looking mainly at the public sector and civil society, maybe farmer organizations, cooperatives, etc., and leaving out the private sector. And you can't really have a value chain approach if you're not looking at all of the different actors in the value chain. And so when the gas came on board, and as I mentioned earlier, I think they grasped, as a funding agency or development funding, they embraced that concept of partnership with the private sector and between the private and public sectors earlier than maybe some other development partners. And it's that flexibility that's made a difference. When we are talking about it, because
Janine,
they looked at food security, not
Minister,
just
if I may.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I see a lot of donor programs, and sometimes there is a difficult relationship between donors and recipients, because donors have an idea of what the recipients should be doing. And everybody remembers the Ebola crisis. And there is a story that I want you to tell about GAF's SP funds, because that to me shows unbelievable flexibility. We know how challenging it was for West Africa that hadn't really seen Ebola before, had no experience of Ebola before. And I know you're in your ministerial flow, but for me, as a journalist, that jumped out at me. What happened to your GAF SP funds during the time of Ebola in Liberia?
Well, what happened when there was, and again, that's where they jumped into the private sector, and looking at beyond just food production, and the normal food things that would go, but seeing how we could support the private sector to actually boost livelihoods. In the cocoa sector, we had a private sector investment project from the GASP of $5 million for the cocoa sector, helping them to build storage facilities for farmers. And then supporting rubber farmers, because rubber farmers are the largest agricultural employer. The rubber sector, sorry, it's the largest contributor from agriculture for Liberia's GDP at between 13 and 17%. And so the GASP had that flexibility to come in and support those areas that would enable people to be able, when you have your livelihood more secure, your food is more secure. And that was that came directly after the Ebola crisis, and also tweaking the project that we had ongoing, the smallholder agricultural productivity project, to embrace commercialization, so that we could go all across the value chain and not just get stuck on one part and then not really impact food security as we'd like. And so.
Let me go back to former Minister Bataka in Togo. Right now, GAFSP is looking at a replenishment fund and looking at how they build up their funds again for the next 5 years. When people are watching this, they may well be watching this live, they may well be coming back to the GAFSP website in months or years to come. What is it that you would say from your experience that you would say would encourage other donors, other stakeholders to put into the GAFSP Replenishment Fund? What story would you tell? What example would you give?
There are three essential elements on which we can capitalize, and that's the strength of GAFSP. It's an instrument that enables you to respond to emergencies, and right now there is an emergency with a shock linked to the pandemic, COVID-19. Togo had experienced this shock, was right out of a crisis, and thanks to GAFSP, we put in place solutions that enabling 1,000 producers to have kits for production. It enabled also local companies to develop, to create employment. And the second point, which is essential, we are in a context of climate change. The agility of GAFSP, its flexibility enables countries, as my colleague Minister Cooper, to respond to each country in a tailored way. That's one of the originalities. It's different from other types of financing that we've experienced. We're getting as close as possible to the needs of the people in every country, taking into account context and conditions. In a context of climate change, Togo, for instance, we were able to develop technologies with through GAFSP to test the mechanism of sustainable management for land and water, to test irrigation. And Togo is based on this to develop irrigation, drip irrigation. And another thing that's very important, and Minister Cooper also underscored this mechanism must create a necessary ramp for sustainability, and GAFSP enables us to develop value chains with the private sector without building solid bases. We were just out of a crisis. We didn't have a robust agricultural institution. There was virtually no private sector in agriculture. The farmer organization, thanks to GAFSP, we able to give the farmers a way to get around and help Togolese entrepreneurs to set up shop with competitive measures. And there was this blossoming. These three elements strike me as essential to bring about the donors to fund this instrument, which is a wonderful tool for development. It's a grassroots instrument, and it's adapted to each country. Tailor-made.
Former Minister Bataka from Togo, current Minister Cooper of Agriculture. Really helpful to have you. We really appreciate you bringing us those concrete examples, those stories down on the ground. Now, if you've been watching from the very beginning, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. We are looking at partnership to transform food systems globally. It's a GAFSP replenishing event. And we tried earlier to connect with Ibrahima Koulibaly. He's the president of the Network of Farmers and Agricultural Producers Organizations of West Africa. You may well know the organization's name as ROPA. We cannot have this event without the voices of the farmers in this event. We have had them on video. We are determined to have them happen live. So Everybody, cross everything. Cross your eyes, cross your fingers, cross your feet. Okay. Ibrahima, are you there?
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, Mrs. Ma'am, I'm here.
Dans vos questions, madame. Oui, ça va bien.
I am well.
Glad you are well.
Merci, moi aussi.
Me too. Ibrahima.
Farmers into this conversation. We were talking about collaboration, the power of collaboration.
Right.
We are collaborating with farmers. Whatever else we're doing, we're collaborating with farmers. What is it that farmers either are doing or want or need to get to SDG 2 because they've got the raw materials already?
Absolument.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you for this question. And to speak about partnership, indeed, I think you have to ask the questions. Why haven't we moved further ahead as opposed to the concrete results we could have had in terms of reducing poverty, hunger, malnutrition? Very often we have bad partners in many countries, and at the sub-regional level there are bad policies. It's very important to go beyond that if we want to forge ahead. Many donors put aside financial needs. You need more funds. We need more resources, but the quality and how we use this is more important than the quantity. So for us, indeed, we need infrastructure, equipment, water. We have to transform, treat our products to sell them. That can be sold by different ways. So the state must play a greater role. They have financial needs, and it must be supported by a whole array of partnerships. But for quality, the people must listen, sit around the table. Transparency must reign supreme. We should act so that the funds go right down to the grassroots, to the villages. That was the problem. That's why we stayed in a situation where hunger and malnutrition increases. But when GAFS created, they asked the good questions. That's why it was created. But the farmers must be at the beginning, at the end of all these issues. They represent 70-80% of the people in certain countries. You can't solve the problem of hunger if you can't discuss vulnerability. We have to start by discussing with the farmers. And when a state decides to start a project, it must discuss with the organization of producers. They have to agree. GAFS enabled that civil society and these organizations, if it has the same, if it can be heard like the states, that's what's unique about GAFS. And they have to assess the projects in the different countries. I'd like to salute the Togolese project, which for us was one of the best projects. And if I don't say it here, I'm not, usually I'm stingy with compliments, but it was one of the best projects. It has to be said loud and clear. Some government do not want to open up their doors. They instrumentalize the farmers to get funds, but at the end of the day, they cut off. But the GAFS is unique, but it must become the norm. You should not use the farmers for such a project. If we want to forge ahead, we have to. Things must be very clear, transparent, and very inclusive. We have to be able to evaluate, not leniently, these projects. This is an extraordinary process, and we're asking the financial partners to refurbish the gas. Now we realize that despite our efforts, when the project, a lot of producer organizations were excluded. We wanted a window for these organizations, and they're yielding results that were presented during this discussion. And I think that we're in the process of creating a healthy competition to show that the private sector, the organization of producers, and the states, the governments that are implementing projects, what can yield the best results. I think that will enable it to reach the objectives of sustainable, to eradicate poverty and hunger and malnutrition.
Coulibaly is the president of Europa, bringing the voice of the farmers, so critical to our conversation, not just today, but any conversation when you're talking about SDG 2. Now, Ibrahima may be stingy with his compliments, but I certainly am not. It was worth the wait to get him into our event. Thank you, Ibrahima Coulibaly. So this is the finale. This is the big moment. This is the point at which GAF SP replenishment officially starts. We officially start with some very, very important donors. Every donor is important, but we got some big ones to kick us off. Over to you, donors.
In the Indo-Pacific region, Australia's neighbourhood, Asia is home to more than half of the world's undernourished people. The Pacific also faces a range of food security challenges. COVID-19, through its impacts on food production, transport and household incomes, is putting further pressure on our region's food security. The achievement of Sustainable Goal 2, ending hunger, requires renewed energy from the global community. Australia is a long-standing supporter of the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, GAF-SP. GAF-SP has a strong track record in delivering results for smallholder farmers. It can play an important role in addressing hunger in this COVID-19 period and beyond. I'm pleased to announce today that Australia will make a further contribution of $10 million to this initiative. This brings Australia's contribution to $150 million since the establishment of GAF-SP. The COVID-19 crisis has heightened the need for us to work together to address food insecurity. We can reach further and we can achieve more when we do. Australia is pivoting its development efforts to strengthen health security, maintain stability, and stimulate economic recovery in countries in our region. We've stepped up support through our NGO partners and established a Pacific humanitarian pathway to stabilise the supply of essential goods and services. I wish to applaud my colleague, Dr. Flaxbart, Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, for her leadership and Germany's generous financial commitment to GAF-SP. I'd also like to acknowledge with appreciation the contributions of other GAF-SP donors and the many GAF-SP partners. GAF-SP has shown it can deliver large-scale impact through coordinated effort. And to that end, I encourage other donors and partners who have not already done so to contribute to this important mechanism. Thank you for everything you do.
Over the past decade, GAF-SP has helped empower millions of rural farmers, including over 5.5 million women. And 2/3 of GAF-SP's projects have helped farmers adapt to climate change by encouraging innovations like more efficient irrigation and drought-tolerant seeds. That's why our foundation is going to continue to support this work. We will be investing $10 million more to GAF-SP alongside Germany. Helping small-scale farmers is one of the best ways to respond to the impacts of COVID-19, to reduce global hunger, and mitigate the effects of climate change. I hope all of you today and many more will join us in helping Germany continue this important work. Thank you.
The 2020 UN SDG Progress Report warned of a declining trend of food and nutritional security. To already persistent problems, conflicts and insecurity, extreme weather events, desert locust plague in Africa, poverty and inequality, the impact caused by COVID-19 places us on the verge of an unprecedented food crisis. The pandemic we are experiencing has revealed more than ever that plant, animal, and human healths are intertwined. In this nexus, sustainable and inclusive agri-food systems play an essential role. We will only be able to eradicate poverty in all its dimensions, preserve the planet, and build sustainable prosperity in cities and rural areas with an agriculture and a rural economy that generates decent employment and sufficient income for small-scale farmers and family farming. An agriculture that empowers women, that articulates the territory and its natural resources, that contributes to the fight against climate change, preserving the soil and biodiversity. For this reason, we need to redouble our efforts to urgently drive this transformation on a global scale. This is the commitment that unites us. This is the objective of the Food Systems Summit that the UN Secretary General has convened for 2021, to accelerate an agroecological transition of the food, agricultural, and rural systems. The Committee on World Food Security will play a fundamental role in this process, and Spain is a proud member of the Bureau for this biennium. This agroecological transition will require everyone's efforts and participation, from producers and communities to multinational companies, from universities to ancestral knowledge, from local and national governments to the United Nations system. We are proud to participate in the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, a program supported by the government of Spain since its launch in 2010 as a result of a then global food crisis. The program has demonstrated to have a strong impact on development due to the ability to adapt and mobilize all stakeholders, from communities and territories to the international community, to the public sector and to companies, to academia and civil society, and for its exemplary governance, for its inclusiveness and operability, as well as for its effectiveness. The renewed program presents an evolution in line with what is required for this transition, to facilitate public-private partnerships and with civil society, centered on people and the planet. This is why Spain will contribute 10 million euros to the program. This reflects Spain's commitment to guarantee the food security of millions of people, to change the trend towards the achievement of SDG 2, and to advance in the decade of action to reach the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much and good luck with the meeting.
We are totting up the figures. Let's do this together. Write down the sums as we get these live pledges in. I'm going to take you around Europe. They're all coming in live. There's a sense of occasion as we do this. Let's go first to the Netherlands. Hello, DG. Introduce yourself.
Let's see if this works. Hi, Femi. Good afternoon.
Hello.
And good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure to meet you here from my living room in The Hague. My name is Kitty van der Heijden. I'm Vice Minister for Development Cooperation in the Netherlands. And thank you also, Maria, and Germany writ large for the initiative to organize this, and also for the leadership that you have shown in the SDG 2 agenda, and an agenda that I take very much to heart and which I'm quite passionate about. Today we have over 820 million people going hungry, even as 1/3 of all food produced is actually getting lost or wasted. And malnutrition is now the #1 factor contributing to a global burden of disease, reduced life expectancy, and having worked in Asia and Africa for many years, I've also seen the lifelong cognitive disabilities that malnutrition can yield in young children due to stunting. Yet food systems also produce 29% of global greenhouse gas emission, and it's responsible as a sector as a whole for 80% of biodiversity loss. So food and how we produce it is not just crucial to the survival of mankind, it's actually also quite critical to the survival of the planetary systems on which we as mankind depend. Now, we believe that the good news is that transforming food systems really is one of the biggest opportunities we have to achieve the SDGs in 2030. And it's also one of the few things that is universal, really with the power to bring everyone together. no matter which country, no matter which culture, whether you're public or private sector, food unites. And I think this particular event also showcases the importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships and collaboration. Now, partnership has been at the, I would say, at the heart of what we have done as the Netherlands in the agri-food sector, and we very strongly support this approach. We even have a special word for it. Some of you may know the word poldering, which means that partners from all walks of life, public sector, private sector, academia, CSO, sit together based on equality with the same aim to really craft together the best and fastest way to achieve that aim. Now, GAF-SP really is an excellent, I would say, global model of poldering. We've been a very long supporter of the private sector window. We will continue to be an important partner in the private sector window. And GAF-SP as a whole has been critical in harmonizing and coordinating, I would say, fundraising, funding, and global action on SDG 2. So we very much continue to support GAF-SP. I can't announce a figure, but you will be able to count on our continued commitment, again, with a strong focus on the private sector engagement, because without private sector, A, there will be no food, B, there will be no food sector transformation, and C, we will simply not be able to achieve the SDGs. We also believe that next year, 2021, we will have the Global Food Systems Summit, which is an incredibly important moment and milestone to really come together, reinforcing that international critical commitment to achieve SDG, to ramp out and stamp out malnutrition. Let's turn the tide by working together, by collaborating more. You can count on us to help achieve the SDG 2. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Many thanks. From the Netherlands to Norway, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our next pledger will introduce themselves. Welcome.
Thank you, and greetings from Norway. My name is Axel Jacobsen. I'm State Secretary for International Development. And dear friends, for the first time in 30 years, we now see poverty is on the rise. And the economic impact of COVID-19 is the major reason for this alarming trend. As many as 100 million people could be pushed back into extreme poverty. And we are facing a health crisis and economic crisis, and thereby also a food crisis at the same time. And the most vulnerable communities are, as always, the hardest hit. And we need to act now. We must act with determination, and we must deliver on our commitment to leaving no one behind. As mentioned, more than 820 million people do not have enough to eat. And globally, every fifth child under the age of 5 is stunted. Access to sufficient, safe, and healthy food is fundamental. It's the basis for good health. And its lack of food is hampering learning in school. To put it simply, without food, no development. And even without the pandemic, food insecurity is a growing challenge, especially on the African continent. Hunger has been on the rise globally for several years. Zero hunger and SDG 2 is a main priority for Norway. Our action plan for sustainable food systems launched last year is designed to assist countries in feeding their own population. It focuses on 4 key components: increased, diversified, and sustainable food production, value creation and getting the food to working markets, nutrition and diet, and last but not least, good policy and governance over the food system. Norway supports more than 50 different projects and programs to improve food systems and increase food security. Amongst these is the Global Agricultural Food Security Program, GAF-SP, and Norway will become a long-term supporter of GAF-SP. The programs focus on reducing hunger and improving nutrition among the poorest and most vulnerable is a vision we share. It is important to ensure that smallholder farmers, and in particular women and youth, are prioritized by the program. Norway is looking forward to working together with GAF-SP and partners I'm therefore pleased to announce that Norway will provide financial support of 400 million Norwegian kroner. That's approximately $42 million for the period up to 23. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, State Secretary. Really appreciate you. Have you noticed how the pledging countries they're rolling out their most important people? They're not putting in somebody who is lower down the list of who they could bring out. They're bringing out their most important people because this is how important the GAF SP Replenishment Fund is to them. In the UK, we go to Minister Duddridge, and Minister Duddridge will describe his title and explain what he does, and then do his pledge. Hello, Minister.
Hello, what a wonderful introduction. Let me thank by starting Dr. Fluxbart for being our host. My name's James Duddridge. I'm the UK's Minister for Africa. Africa is a continent which has been a total and absorbing focus in my life professionally, politically, and was where I met my wife a number of years ago. So I know the continent has the resources, the drive, the creativity to flourish, but it cannot do so when people go hungry, any more than that can't happen in Asia, Latin America, Europe, or for that matter, anywhere else. And it's high time that we achieved a world without hunger. The COVID-19 has hit African economies hard, as indeed it has across the rest of the world. Last month, our Foreign Secretary announced a call to action to protect the world's poorest from the increasing threat of famine. And the drivers of food insecurity, of course, are complex, and we all recognize that. They include conflict, climate, pests, and other shocks. Even economic development is a key part of that, as well as COVID. The recent Nobel Peace Award to the World Food Programme is a reminder of the close proximity between conflict issues and hunger issues. And I very much congratulate the WFP on this award. As well, WFP's got a valued contribution in GAF SP to help build resilience in some of the most vulnerable geographies. But ultimately, food insecurity requires political solutions. We must take urgent action now on immediate hunger and crucially prevent even more people falling into food insecurity and the crisis that means in the future. At the same time, we must work to transform food systems for the long term. We must address all the drivers of hunger and break the cycle of crises. The UK wants to agree shared priorities with international partners to achieve everlasting food security. Global events in 2021 will help us. They include the UK presidency of G7, followed by the Germans' presidency in 22, Italy's G20, the Global Climate Conference, COP26, in the UK and COP27, in Africa, the Nutrition for Growth Conference, and the Food System Summit. There are plenty of opportunities to drive this agenda forward. Sadly, the timing of the UK's budget cycle means that, unlike others, I'm unable in a position today to add an exact figure of what we will be able to do. I apologise for that. It would have been a lovely thing to do today, but it's around the UK political system and the timings. The Global Agricultural Security and Food Programme continues, however, to be one of the most important ways we help drive enduring improvements in food security and allow businesses to prosper. GAF SP demand-led model brings together public and private finance, which is absolutely crucial. It helps multilateral agencies to collaborate. This increases agricultural incomes, widens market to access, improves nutrition, strengthens farmers' resilience to climate events and other shocks. It's clearly an essential thing for the international community to do. The UK's most recent financial contribution is supporting advisory services to seek out private sector investment to support national agricultural plans in challenging investment contexts. And that is absolutely essential because economic development and growth is the answer to the long-term problems, as well as needing to address famine shorter term. It's already demonstrated by focusing recent resources on addressing COVID-19. It's shown flexibility, particularly in fragile and conflict areas. And finally, let me conclude by thanking everyone once again, but particularly the German government that have really stepped up on this issue and so many other development issues, showing us where to lead. Your contribution has been truly marvellous, and I commend that. Thank you everyone involved for bringing us here today. No cause could be more worthwhile than ending hunger. Together, we can do that, and quite simply, we must.
Thank you very much, Minister. BMZ, Chair of GAF-SP, also host of this replenishment launch for GAF-SP. Seems suiting then that we should have Dr. Maria Flasbach, who has been standing by to bring us home with the pledges for this particular launch and wrap us up. Dr. Maria Flasbach, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, esteemed partners from all over the globe, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. As our ministry currently chairs GAF-SP steering committee and it's hosting this launch of GAF-SP's first replenishment, it's my great pleasure to address you. We are pleased that you all have joined us in raising $1.5 billion for GAF-SP over the next 5 years. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. With your contribution and statements of support, we are off to a successful start. As Minister Müller has already announced during his introductory remarks, I'm pleased to confirm that BMZ will contribute 202 million euros to GAF-SP's replenishment. With the new funds, GAF-SP will be able to launch the next call for proposals to work for strong, climate-resilient farmer livelihoods and food-secure families in spite of COVID-19. But this is only the beginning. We have heard from farmers, ministers, business owners, and development partners. They agreed that GAF-SP adds important value to the global partnership on SDG 2. It is a flexible and responsive instrument that can be adapted to their needs. It helps in targeting much needed additional financing to where it has the greatest impact. As such, GAF-SP is clearly well positioned to make an important difference. As a demand-led financing mechanism, it is able to pool donor funds to deliver now in the poorest countries in the world. This success would not have been possible without your support. However, GAF-SP needs more in order to continue delivering. New global evidence from the Center for Development Research in Bonn, ZEF, and Ceres 2030 indicates that the investment gap in agriculture and food systems is huge, particularly for meeting SDG 2 in time. This is also evident from the high demand for GAF-SP, which has only been able to fund 1 out of 3 projects during previous calls for proposal. We need GAF-SP to continue to sustain the commitments made by the G20 a decade ago and to place smallholder farmers at the center of efforts to increase food security, raise rural incomes, and build resilient livelihoods, especially in view of the climate change. Together with its multilateral implementing partners, ADB, AFDB, FAO, IDB, IFAD, IFC, the World Bank, and the World Food Programme, GAF-SP has reached 13 million farmers so far. But we want and we need to reach at least 12 million more by 2025. Thank you to everyone who has played an active part in this important partnership against hunger in the past. And please allow me to urge us all to do even more together, now and in future, in order to reach SDG 2 and to build a world without hunger. Now, it is my pleasure to give the floor to our moderator for the final tally. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Mia Flasbart, the Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. So, stretching this out just a little bit. So the plan for the replenishment funds for the next 5 years is 1.5 billion. How much do we have on launch right now? Just getting up to $300 million. There's a way to go. But for a launch, it's not bad. Thank you to all of our speakers, to the panel, to all of you who are in the questions and answers and comments and taking part in our replenishment launch for GAF-SP. This entire event will live on the GAF-SP website. You can look at it anytime you want to. So the last thing that I need to say is just thank you very much for watching. It has been a pleasure being your host. And as GAF-SP always says, invest farm to fork. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.